I always considered myself a skeptic. Ghosts, spirits, haunted schools, I thought it was all nonsense. I was a senior at Northfield High, a school that had been around for decades with peeling paint, creaking floors, and rumors whispered in hushed tones by underclassmen. None of that scared me. What I didn't realize until that night was that some parts of a school are never meant to be touched, and some doors are never meant to be opened. It all started the day Mr. Halverson, our history teacher, handed out a stack of extra credit assignments. Most kids groaned, but I liked a challenge. One sheet was different from the others. It wasn't just an essay prompt. It was an invitation, a dare disguised as homework. Explore the old wing, document anything you find. Extra credit if you spend an hour inside. The old wing. Nobody went there. Not students, not teachers. The doors were chained with a faded "Do Not Enter" sign hanging crookedly on one of them. Curiosity got the better of me. I waited until after school when the halls were empty, and the janitor's radio buzzed faintly from the maintenance closet. The chain was rusted, and with a small tug it gave way. The door creaked open into a long corridor lit by a single flickering bulb. Dust hung thick in the air, and the smell of mildew made me wrinkle my nose. Everything felt wrong. The walls were lined with old lockers, dented and scratched. Some were hanging off their hinges. Old bulletin boards displayed faded announcements. Some dated back decades. Science Fair, 1978. Winter Formal, 1983. It was like stepping into a time capsule, except time itself seemed warped here. I started walking, notebook in hand, recording observations. The air was heavy, almost alive. About 10 minutes in, I noticed the first sound, a soft shuffle, like someone dragging their shoes on the floor. I froze, thinking it might be another student, but the halls were supposed to be empty. The sound stopped as abruptly as it started. I shook it off, blaming my imagination. As I reached the end of the corridor, I found a door partially open, its edges covered in chipped paint. Beyond it was a classroom that shouldn't have existed. The layout was wrong. Desks were arranged in concentric circles, and the chalkboard spanned 3 walls covered in equations I didn't understand. The air was colder here, and the silence pressed down on me. I stepped inside, then I saw it. The desks were filled with students. Not my classmates, not anyone I recognized. Their faces were blurred like smeared photographs. They didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink, but I knew somehow that they were staring at me. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. My notebook fell to the floor with a soft thud that sounded deafening in the oppressive silence. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. The lock clicked. Panic surged through me. I ran to the door, tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I noticed movement among the students. One of them raised a hand, slowly, deliberately. Then another. And another. They began to chant in unison, a low hum that turned into a guttural whisper. Stay, stay, stay. I backed away, bumping into a desk. The whispers grew louder, echoing around the room. Shadows flickered along the walls, but there was no light source aside from the dim glow of the bulb above. My heart was racing, my lungs burning. I needed to get out. I slammed my shoulder against the door, again and again. Then everything went silent. The students were gone. The classroom was empty. The concentric desks had returned to a normal row and column arrangement. The chalkboard was clean. I swore I could hear soft breathing behind me. I turned slowly. On the board, written in smudged chalk, were the words, "You belong here now." I tried the door. It opened. The corridor outside was exactly as it had been. I ran, past the lockers, past the peeling walls, past the flickering bulb, and burst through the main doors into the fresh evening air. My legs were shaking. I couldn't breathe. I told myself it was a hallucination, stress, exhaustion. I didn't mention it to anyone. But the old wing was no longer locked when I returned to school the next day. The chain lay on the floor and the sign had fallen behind a radiator. Nobody else went near it. Nobody else noticed the change. That night I couldn't sleep. My room felt like it was closing in, the shadows in the corners longer, darker. I kept hearing whispers just soft enough to be mistaken for the wind. But there was no wind. I returned to the old wing the next week, notebook in hand, determined to prove it was all in my head. The door was closed, locked. I tugged at it, no give. I jiggled the handle, nothing. I ran to the janitor's office. The old man raised an eyebrow. "There's nothing back there," he said. "Nothing but dust and cobwebs," I insisted. I described the classroom, the desks, the students, the whispers. He shook his head slowly. You shouldn't be messing around here. That part of the school, it's not meant to be found. Found? I asked, incredulous. Sometimes, he said, voice barely above a whisper. The building keeps what it wants. Some rooms, they only appear for certain people. I laughed nervously. You mean like ghosts? He didn't answer. He just stared at me with eyes that seemed far too old for his face. Days passed. I avoided the old wing, but the nightmares didn't stop. Every night I'd wake up to the same classroom, the same concentric desks, the same blurred faces staring. Every night the chalkboard would have new writing. Don't forget us. Come back. You belong here now. One evening, unable to take it anymore, I returned again, determined to destroy the notebook where I had written everything. The door was ajar. My hands trembled as I pushed it open. The classroom was empty. The desks were normal. The board was clean. Relief washed over me until I noticed the notebook. My own notebook sitting neatly on the teacher's desk. I had left it in my bag weeks ago. How did it get here? I approached it slowly. On the first page, written in my handwriting, were words I did not remember writing. I will stay. I will stay forever. I will never leave. The room began to tilt. The walls stretched upward. Shadows pooled in the corners like liquid. The whispering began again. I tried to run, but my feet were glued to the floor. The desks shifted, encircling me. I screamed, but no sound escaped. And then silence. The next morning, the janitor found my notebook on the floor outside the old wing. I was gone. No trace, no sign of struggle. Just an empty corridor and a faint smell of mildew. They never found me. And sometimes, late at night, students report seeing a new figure in the old wing classroom. A lone boy, staring from the back row, his face blurred and unrecognizable, just like the others. The school whispers that I am still there, that I belong there now, and maybe, just maybe, I do. I'll admit it, I wasn't the kind of student who believed in coincidences. Life at Crestwood High was ordinary, almost painfully so, until the day everything changed. I remember it like it happened yesterday, even though it's been years. It was supposed to be a normal Thursday. I was in my junior year, walking through the crowded hallways with my best friend Jenna. The bell rang, students shuffling to their next classes, lockers slamming, gossip echoing in the air. Then the announcement came over the PA. Attention students, this is a lockdown. All students and staff, please remain in your classrooms. This is not a drill. I froze. My classroom was on the third floor, far from the main office. Panic didn't hit immediately. People thought it was a mistake. But then the doors locked. Automatically, the lights flickered and the intercom crackled again. Do not leave your rooms. Do not open your doors. Stay calm. The first hour passed slowly. Whispers filled the room. My teacher, Mrs. Caldwell, tried to reassure us, but even she looked pale. The sound of footsteps in the hall grew louder, then stopped, then louder again, like something was pacing outside our door. By the second hour, fear had settled in. Phones didn't work. Wi-Fi was gone. The lights were dimming. And the footsteps? They weren't human. Not entirely. There was a rhythm to them that made my chest tighten, a hollow dragging sound punctuated by what I could only describe as soft, wet scraping. Jenna whispered that she thought she saw something moving past the windows, the ones too high to see out clearly. I shrugged it off at first. She wasn't usually the panicky type, but there was real terror in her eyes. By the fourth hour, reality was warping. The walls of the classroom didn't feel solid. Shadows stretched across the corners unnaturally. Every time the footsteps stopped, it felt like a heartbeat skipped. When they started again, it was closer, then farther, then closer, like whatever was outside was toying with us. We tried to look out of the windows. The courtyard was empty. No staff, no other students. Just a fog that hadn't been there before, creeping across the asphalt, thick and cloying. Around the fifth hour, Mrs. Caldwell went pale. She whispered, something I couldn't understand, then backed into the corner of the room. Her eyes darted to the door, then she whispered clearly, "They're in the walls." I laughed nervously. "Who?" Her hands shook. I don't know, but they're here, always here, waiting. The lights went out completely. Panic erupted. Some students started screaming, pounding on doors, shouting names. The scraping outside grew faster, more deliberate. It wasn't footsteps anymore. It was a crawl, a scuttling sound, like claws on concrete. Jenna and I huddled under a desk. The floor vibrated slightly, the vibrations moving through our bones. Then came a sound I will never forget. A low, wet, gurgling moan, coming from beneath us, from the very foundations of the school. I tried to keep my breathing quiet. I prayed. I didn't know what for, just that I was alive. And then the first student disappeared. One moment he was screaming, the next he was gone. His desk was empty. The chair tipped over. No trace. The walls hadn't opened. The ceiling hadn't fallen. He simply vanished. We didn't know what to do. Every hour after that, another student disappeared. The floorboards groaned under the weight of whatever moved beneath us. The fog outside seeped through cracks in the windows, curling into the room carrying a scent I couldn't identify, like iron, decay, and something sweet, cloying, and wrong. By midnight, only Jenna and I were left. Mrs. Caldwell I don't know. I don't remember exactly. I think she screamed and then vanished. Her scream cut off mid-word. It still echoes in my nightmares. We tried to escape. Every door we opened led to a wall. Every staircase ended in a dead end. The school seemed alive, reshaping itself. Hallways twisted, lockers stacked differently. Windows that should have led outside now revealed nothing but black, swirling fog. We started hearing whispers then, soft at first, then insistent. Not human voices. Hundreds of them, layered, overlapping. They called our names, our fears, our secrets. They promised safety if we stayed. They promised death if we ran. We ran anyway. Down a hallway I swore I had never seen before. The walls slick with something wet. The smell, choking. We turned a corner and found a classroom, empty but lined with mirrors. In them our reflections were wrong. Our faces stretched, distorted, mouths wider than they should have been. Our eyes, hollow, black. And then I saw them in the reflections. Behind us, hundreds of figures, faceless, dragging themselves along the floor and walls closer and closer. They weren't solid, more like mist shaped into bodies, but they moved with purpose. I couldn't move. Jenna screamed. I grabbed her hand. I woke up in the gym. The morning sun streamed through high windows. The PA buzzed. Lockdown over. All students accounted for. I blinked. The gym was full of students chatting, complaining, laughing as if nothing had happened. Except Jenna was missing. And Mrs. Caldwell. And all the others who had screamed with me. I asked around. They hadn't seen her, or anyone. Teachers shook their heads. Security cameras showed nothing unusual. No doors opened on their own. No fog. No shadows. Nothing. I tried to report it, tried to explain. But how do you explain being trapped in a school with whatever that was? Nobody believed me. Weeks later, I went back at night. The school was empty. The lights flickered. I found the same hallway, the same gym, the same mirrors. I could hear whispers calling my name. I ran, and when I looked back, I swear I saw Jenna, her face twisted in the mirror, mouthing silently, "Stay." I left and never went back. But sometimes I see her in my dreams, in the corners of classrooms, in hallways I've never walked, whispering, waiting. And I know that one day she, or something else, will come for me again. Because at Crestwood High, the lockdown never truly ends. I never thought much about the janitor at Eastbridge High. He was old, hunched, always muttering under his breath while pushing that squeaky mop down the hallways late at night. His name was Mr. Larkin. Students joked he was part ghost himself, always there, never leaving. But I thought it was just a creepy persona to scare freshmen. That was before I realized some things are meant to stay unseen and some people are better left unnoticed. It started during my senior year. I had taken the late shift in the library to finish a project. The school was empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The air smelled like old books and polished wood. I was alone, or I thought I was. The first time I noticed him was subtle. A shadow moving past the stacks, too quick to be a student, too deliberate to be random. When I looked, no one was there. Just the empty aisles and my own reflection in the glass display cases. I chalked it up to exhaustion and kept working. Then came the sound of footsteps. Heavy, slow, echoing off the tile floor. Not the tap of a student running or a teacher walking normally. These were deliberate, purposeful, and coming closer. I glanced over my shoulder. The library doors were closed, locked, and yet I could feel him moving around me. I turned sharply, and there he was, Mr. Larkin, standing by the reference desk. But there was something wrong. His head tilted too far to one side, almost snapping his neck, his eyes too wide, reflecting the fluorescent light like black mirrors. "Evening, kid," he rasped, voice dry like crumpled paper. Late night, I nodded, heart racing. "Yeah, just finishing a project." He didn't respond. He just stood there staring. And then he whispered, "You shouldn't be here alone." I laughed nervously. "I can handle it. Don't worry." He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. That night I stayed late longer than usual trying to finish my work. The library grew colder, the lights flickering. I could feel the air shift, the hair on my arm standing on end. I heard a soft dragging sound behind me, like nails scraping across the floor. I turned and no one was there. By the third night, things escalated. Books started falling off the shelves, no wind, no explanation. Whispered voices echoed between the stacks, calling my name, sometimes mimicking my own voice. Shadows shifted unnaturally, curling and twisting where none should exist. And always I could feel him. Mr. Larkin standing just out of sight, watching, waiting. I tried to avoid him, to stay busy, to pretend I didn't notice. But every corner I turned, he was there. Or at least the sense of him was. I couldn't see his body sometimes, just the presence like a stain on the air. Then the students started disappearing. It began with Sam, a quiet sophomore who stayed after school for tutoring. He never came out of the library. Teachers said he had left, went home early. Nobody checked. But I knew. I had heard the whispers when I stayed late, his voice calling, screaming silently into the shadows. Next was a janitorial assistant, a kid who worked the same hours as Mr. Larkin. He never came back. The rumors grew, but no one wanted to acknowledge the pattern. One night, driven by fear and morbid curiosity, I stayed past midnight. The lights flickered and dimmed. Shadows stretched across the stacks, moving with intent. I could hear dragging again, closer than ever. And then I saw him. Mr. Larkin was at the end of the aisle, but his body wasn't right. His limbs seemed elongated, bending in impossible angles. His eyes were hollow, dark pits that seemed to swallow the light. And he wasn't alone. Around him, shadows began to detach from the walls, forming shapes like twisted versions of people, faces melting and unrecognizable. He whispered my name, the sound wet and guttural, vibrating in my chest. "You stay. Or join." I ran. I don't know how, but I made it to the door. It wouldn't open. The library had changed. The walls were taller, the ceiling higher. Bookshelves stretched into shadows that seemed infinite. Behind me, I could hear the scraping, the whispers. The laughter, children and adults distorted, merging into one horrible chorus. I ducked into a study room, locked the door, and pressed myself against the wall. My breath came in ragged gasps. The door handle rattled. A shadow passed under the crack. Then silence. I don't remember how long I stayed there, but when I dared to peek out, the library was empty. The lights were normal. The doors opened. Everything appeared ordinary. But my notebook, where I'd been documenting all the oddities, was gone. Weeks later, I tried to return to the library during the day. The place seemed normal. Mr. Larkin was there, hunched over the mop, muttering to himself. I froze. For a moment, our eyes met. His were empty, hollow, and a faint smile curled his lips. I left. I never returned after school hours. But I know the library isn't done with me. Every night I dream of it. The endless stacks, the whispers, the dragging. Sometimes I wake up to the sound of nails on my floorboards, slow and deliberate, and I know with a sick certainty that he's watching, waiting for me to return. Because in Eastbridge High, the janitor never leaves. And neither do the ones he takes.